Hello, everyone. Welcome to the meeting of the Waynesboro Area School District Board of Directors for April the 12th, 2022. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Ms. Kuzer, we don't have everybody present tonight, so let's do roll call, please.
Okay. Mr. Marvin?
Here.
Mrs. Zimmerman? Mrs. Fortney? Here. Mr. Smith?
Here.
Mrs. Miles? Here. Mrs. Strite? Here. Dr. Royer? Here. Mrs. Sullivan? Royer?
Here.
You say me?
Sarah?
I'm here. Okay. Okay, so the agenda tonight, I don't believe there's any changes. So do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
Move to approve.
Second.
Any questions from anyone? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, minutes, same thing. You have the minutes from our last meeting. Do we have a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second.
Questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Dr. Klein.
Hey, just a couple of things, real short things. Just wanted to let you know that Hannah Height, one of our high school students, was the runner-up at the regional Rotary speech contest. They do a four-way speech contest in the region, and she placed second. And it's been a while since we've had a student place that far up. So want to congratulate Hannah. The other thing is that the county runs a youth Franklin County leadership program, and 3 of our high school ninth graders are going to be participating. So we wish them the best next year as they participate. That's it.
Okay, great. Okay, for public comment tonight, we have one person who would like to speak. That's Mrs. Bartholow. So if you come up to the podium, please.
Have to say my name and where I live.
You know, we used to do that. You can, but now we have the card,
That's
so we're
fine.
good.
All right, good evening. I'm here to speak on behalf of my 10-year-old daughter. Over the last year, she has developed severe anxiety and depression to the point of seeing multiple doctors, closing off and wanting to be alone, not wanting to go to school, making herself sick and crying all the time. My child has been belittled in front of other students, made an example of, and continuously screamed at for no reason by a teacher who acts like this is no big deal. My child has good grades, loves everyone, and loves school until this year. Her dad and I have taught her to respect her elders, and this makes me sick to think that someone has so much effect on a child like this. I've had multiple conversations with the principal and assistant principal, but nothing seems to get better. We started a checkout program with teachers and counselors to help with her anxiety. Instead, this has made it worse because those teachers report to other teachers, making the bullying getting worse. How do we teach our children to respect a person like this? I could go on and on, but I know there is limited time. I have collaborated with a group of over 13 other individuals with similar problems, and not mentioning this teacher's name at all, they knew and identified this teacher with precision. If bullying is not tolerated now, how does this person still have a job? What are you going to do to fix this problem and other bullying issues at this school? At this point, I have followed the chain of command, and now I am here because I cannot see my daughter go through this anymore. Thank you.
Have you spoken to the family, Dr. Sternheim? She said she's gone through the chain of command. Has she spoken with you?
Called today.
Okay.
I returned her call and then she
Okay.
returned my call, but I was out of the office. I was here, so.
Okay. I appreciate you doing that with following the chain of command. Hopefully, you know, we can come some kind of resolution wherever this goes. You know, we of course don't know the information or anything. The board does not, but we can certainly look into that. So.
Sit down anytime with any member.
Okay.
And this is with regards to Fairview Avenue.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Moving on then to board reports. Anyone have a report from any committees or anything? We did have an academic committee meeting planned for tomorrow, but due to a couple members needing to attend a funeral, we have had to postpone that. So the academic committee meeting will not occur until 11 o'clock on April 27th. For anybody who would be interested in coming to that. Anything coming up this week? We did a budget last night too. Our chairman of our budget committee is not here. We did kind of clarify some things amongst the board members there. For our, tonight, we're going to be voting on whether or not to accept the preliminary budget, which is not the final budget, but so we did discuss that last night. Anything else? No? Okay, that's not me, so. Policy, Mrs. Sullivan is gone. Okay,
Yeah,
she's
it's
gone.
up.
It is on the 20th at 1 o'clock.
The 20th at 1. Okay.
Mrs. Sullivan is still on.
Okay. Okay. Well, okay, we got it, but you're like, their sound's not working right, but we got the date. Thank you. Okay, no, our students are both involved in off-campus activities tonight, but Karis did send me something I just wanted to share that she wrote. In case she wasn't back. She said that I wanted to shout out to Dr. McCallum for the very comprehensive email she sent out to our seniors about graduation. I think it helped answer a lot of questions and consolidated important information. So that's all I got from students today, but appreciate that acknowledgement for Dr. McCallum on that. Okay, on to presentations then. First presentation of the two we have tonight is Laurel Life.
Good evening. My name is Mark Keck, and I'm the CEO of Folium and Laurel Life. With me this evening, I have Paul Monsha and Darren Schaefer. They represent our programs as far as leadership within the company here in your local district. A copy of my PowerPoint for the night is being passed around. We appreciate the opportunity to share with you about the services we've been providing in your district during the course of this year, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've been doing across the last several years, actually. So the first slide says Folium, and just to clarify that is, as our organization, we have a corporate name as Folium. And you think of other organizations like Procter & Gamble, they have many products, many trade names, and we're no different. We have Laurel Life, we have Affinity, we have Rolling Hills Transit, and Mill Road Adventures. And so tonight I'm talking specifically about Laurel Life services. In the 21-22 school year, you'll see there in front of you, there are 5 different categories that we have here in your district. We have school-based outpatient, we have shared funding outpatient, we have transition classrooms, the boost classrooms, and social workers. I'm going to, in a brief time with you this evening, give you a snapshot of what's been happening in each one of those, numbers we've served, and just tell you a little bit about each individual program. So we'll begin with school-based outpatient therapists. So currently we have 2 therapists that are assigned to your district. They've been here for several years, and we're billing insurances and third-party managed care for those services. And all you have to do is provide a course space in your buildings, K-12. You see before you there a synopsis of the different categories of how many we've served. We've served 130 so far this year, K-12. We have 36 on the waiting list at the moment. The demands continue to climb in every area of the state we serve. We serve about 35 different districts in Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, it's happening everywhere. That's the need for services, that is. So when we break down the secondary level, you'll see that there's 27 currently on the rolls in the high school and 21 middle school. In your elementary, broken down 21 Fairview, 7 Summitville, or Summitview, excuse me. Maury has 4 and Hooverville has a 0, but that's current enrollment. We have had referrals from Hooverville during the course of the year. We have a full-time therapist and a part-time therapist, and they have been willing to come into your high school building, into your early learning center wing, and provide some services after school. We coordinated that with Dr. Sternerheim and opened up the opportunity for a few students to be seen after hours. It's been 10 during the course of the year. So when we compare the past year, last school year, you had about 100 students served. So you're a little bit ahead of last school year. Moving on to the next category, shared funding. So one of the things that's happened, we've had difficulties just like you as a district finding staff, whether it's a bus driver or a teacher or a counselor. And finding therapists has been a challenge for us. And so we were looking, can we find anybody part-time that can build to full-time? That's been like a needle in a haystack. And so what we've tried to do is come up with creative ways, and a shared funding model gave us that opportunity. So you're one of 3 districts in the state where we're doing a shared funding program right now. So you'll see why offer shared funding? Well, it takes your budget, a sum of money from your school budget, and we bill managed care whenever we can, or third-party insurances if applicable, and then that offsets the total cost to you. But it gives us a chance to bring a full-time therapist on board rather than having to find someone and wait until they can build up to a full-time caseload. So we're excited to have that person on board. We have a master's level therapist in your secondary level, middle school and high school. He drifts back and forth between the two. And so far, since the latter portion of February, he's been here seeing students. You'll notice on the next slide that you have a breakdown of the number of students that he's seen. So part of his time is doing individual therapy. He may do groups at some point, but he also provides support through your guidance office for students that are maybe frequent flyers, having stressors and anxieties and being overwhelmed, having family dynamic issues coming into the guidance office. So he's able to support those students as well. So thus far, he's had 19 ongoing students that are for ongoing therapy, and 3 of those 19 have been managed care billable. So we are beginning to offset some of the costs that you have by billing the managed care. There's 2 policy violators that have been through your system here in the district, and he is seeing them on an ongoing basis. And then there are 14 others that he is seeing as well, and they would be, of course, paid for out of the portion of money from your district funds. One of the things that's been a challenge across the state, so often our therapists need to attend an IEP meeting, or they're making calls home, or they need to do an observation, and they're not items that we can bill for. So the shared funding model gives us a chance to be able to support your students and your teachers and be able to engage them and gain further ground with helping the students as much as possible. So the shared funding person also, as I mentioned, works with the guidance office closely. And so far, just in the last approximately 2 months, he's had 33 other students that he has seen and engaged to provide support within your middle school and high school. He has made some home visits with your administration, asked him to go along, and that's happened 3 times in the past few months. And of course, a lot of communication with the parents. So we're excited. So far, the shared funding model has been embraced by the different districts, the 3 districts where it's happening. We're hoping that we can continue that next year. Your district has been so gracious to partner with us and pilot that project. At the end, we can come back, and if you have any questions on any of the specific programs, we'll do that. So the third category I want to talk about tonight is the transition classrooms. You can go to the next slide, please. So a little bit about the background here. You do have K-12 programming in this model. You have a K-2 program that started in January. You have a 3-5 program that started in the 1920 school year. You have a middle school, 6-8, And that program started in the 1920 school year as well. And then we have a high school model 912 that is brand new this school year. It's been in place since September. We've broken down what we're going to talk about with transition into a little bit of treatment approach, just to give you a snapshot of that. They all are trauma-informed interventions rooted in brain science. As a company, we've been focused on brain science and trauma-informed for over a decade now. Brain science for almost 15 years. And looking at why students are behaving and what can we do that's going to quiet their stressors and be able to allow them to re-engage academically and make the transition back to the regular classroom. The slide that you see on the screen or in front of you there has looks like a house. And so this represents our ARC framework. And just like a house, you need to have a strong foundation and work your way up in building the other components and the other floors so that the student is well-rounded and ready to make the shifts back to the regular environment. So the ARC stands for attachment, regulation, and competency. So we work all of those elements. Our staff go through extensive training and we incorporate those elements into the environment in the classroom. You can go to the next slide, please. So I've broken down a little bit of the data on each one of the levels. So K2, which I shared earlier, started in January, has had 7 referrals so far. And all 7 students have classes in your regular education environment at the moment, which is fantastic. That's somewhat unusual this quickly since January, but your team has been great in working to make those things happen as quickly as possible in the elementary school. When you shift to the 3-5, in the past 3 school years, there's been a total of 26 students served in that model. You'll notice that it says COVID beside the transition rate. Of course, this model started in your buildings right at the height when COVID broke loose towards the end of that school year. And so transitions began to actually in some locations were halted just for the safety features and reasons. And we kept the students in the classroom and in our classroom and took care of their education and the treatments across the rest of that school year and into the following. But we have had 4 students that have transitioned part-time and 2 that transition full-time. You'll notice that there does break down a few other students that have had to move on to a more restrictive environment. Maybe they went to virtual learning. You'll see that on the handout, as well as the numbers that have moved out of your district. Go to the next slide, please. Looking at the secondary level, you'll see the numbers. Again, the middle school, 2019 through 2022, they've had 43 students. And that's obviously a pretty substantially higher number. The little ones, K2, normally we cap the numbers at 8 at any given moment in the classroom, and the 3-5 program has a cap of 10. And in the middle school and the high school, we usually cap at any given moment at 15. But since so many students at that secondary level are rotating in and out, oftentimes we serve 25 to 30 without many problems of rotating them into classes and back and forth and checking in as needed with our staff. So the middle school served 43 and the transition rate's been 53%. You see the breakdown of how many have been part-time and how many have been full transitions and the other corresponding numbers for out of placement and moving out of the district. You'll notice at the bottom of the middle school category, it mentions additional served. Oftentimes when we put our model into a district, there are students that are maybe on the cusp of coming in, cusp of being referred. And so we look at, can we engage them and provide support to your teacher, give maybe some strategies. Maybe we talk, our therapists will talk one-on-one with those students, trying to perhaps help them so they don't have to be officially referred to the model. And in your middle school, across those 3 years, we've had 11 additional students that we've helped that do not count in the 43. When we move to the high school, you see this being its first year, the numbers are a little bit lower. There's 19 that we've served and 42% have been in a transitional mode. I was interested to look, what's that total across the first program in 2019 through the present? 95 students we've served in this model. And the overall transition rate is 46%. You can change slides, please. We looked at the special ed percentage. This model is a regular ed program. Special ed students are able to be referred and receive services. So 40% of the students have an IEP identification. Go to the next slide, please. A few other benefits of the transition classroom. We've been providing some extra supports for professional development at no additional cost as part of the contract. Been in trauma-informed training and some other categories of training. We also have been serving as a consultant, as I mentioned earlier, giving observations and feedback to your faculty and your teachers when asked. And as I said earlier, also the additional supports to students that don't actually enter the classroom as an official referral. So that's the transition classroom. So we've covered outpatient, 2 categories, transition. The 4th category this evening is the boost program. This model is a new one to your district and a new one for us. Partnership we created and collaborated. And this model, change the next slide, please. This model really was designed to educationally support your students that were coming back from cyber learning during the pandemic and were really struggling academically to get things finished, struggling to be able to engage and get to school. And as we found, a lot of them had mental health issues that have arisen, as well as maybe now overt behaviors where they weren't present before. And so the goal was to try to create a platform that would allow students to come in, have some direct staff that could engage them, bridge the gap, if you will, back into your regular environment. This model serves 6th through 9th graders. We have 4 staff in 2 different classrooms inside your middle school. And we have a lot of direct communication with the parents of those students as well. When we started this model, we intended it to not have behavioral issues, or not many. And unfortunately, that has arisen. We couldn't predict what was going to happen. And so we've had some adversity there and some adjustments to make along the way. And your team of leaders in your building were new, I think, to their positions as well. And our staff were new to the building and a new model, but we've journeyed through together. And I think when you look at the results on the next slide, it's been quite substantial, even among the adversities and challenges we've had. There's been 49 students that have gone through that boost program, classrooms. 16 are in a transitional mode part-time, and 11 have fully transitioned. That's about 55% of the students have made a transition. There have been a handful, 2 that went to a more restrictive environment outside our program, and a couple moved out of the district. There has been a lot of home communication and even home visits done with this model. There's actually been 26 home visits during the course of the year. The final category I wanted to talk about a few minutes tonight was our social workers. We have 2 social workers in your district. You, I'm sure, are well aware that in the fall, unfortunately, we had a longtime social worker and member of our faculty pass away, Mary Ann Glockner. And she had an intern that was working with her at the time, and the intern has stepped into that role. And so we have 2 social workers here in your district at the present. They're serving K-12. One focuses elementary, one focuses secondary. They're connecting with families, connecting with students, providing topical groups. They've actually had 45 students that have been in the groups that they've led. They're also deeply involved in the environments in your schools, working with in your team meetings and supporting the staff and faculty. They've written and collaborated on student absence improvement plans, 51. You can move to the next slide, please. 51 students or 51 plans have been written. And they've made referrals for 55 students to community-based agencies and services. And then as a follow-up, social workers are checking in with the families, see if they need additional support, see how they've done with the follow-through. 77% of the families have followed through and engaged in the services when referrals have been made. course, they're doing home visits, as I said earlier. And some of the groups that they've provided have been grief and loss groups, anger management. They provided a girls' self-esteem group, as well as a girls' group on relationships. Can move to the next slide, please. Oh, you're already there. Back up, please. All right, so a little summary of the data for the social workers. There's been 106 students served this year. We mentioned the improvement plans, 51. And you can see the other numbers that I've already shared. 106. I was curious of all the different programs I've talked about, what was the total? It's over 440 students that Laurel Life has served in some way during the course of the last several years. Some of those were a couple years in programming, but obviously there's the growing needs that are plaguing our communities and our schools. The needs are much higher, even as we heard this evening from the speaker. More and more, we face the challenge of finding those staff. And so when we can do things in collaboration and keep the students here and work closely with your administration and faculty, I think we make greater dividends and have more success. Our transition classrooms at the moment, we have 30 of them in Pennsylvania. And there's only a handful of districts that have K-12, and of course, you're one of them. So we appreciate all that you have collaborated with us on during the course of the last several years, and look forward to what lays ahead. You can move to the Heirloom Challenges already. So I want to talk just a little bit about some of the adversities that your administration and us as Laurel Life have had to overcome. Obviously, with mental health on the rise, we needed to be creative. We've said that already. Space inside districts everywhere across the state is a commodity, and your district is no different. So we have faced challenges finding counseling offices for our therapists, finding the adequate, appropriate space for our transition classrooms. I would share with you that the middle school program right now is, wow, it's a huge space. I'm not sure what it's referred to in the district. Dr. Klein, the area where the classroom is now, what was that before?
Used to be a shop.
A shop, okay. And so what we have found is that when the space is too large, it's like putting a couple students in the gym and having them try to stand still in a little area. It doesn't work well. And so we've been working on creative ideas with your administration and even on our end, what can we do to make that area smaller? Or if there's even a different space in the building that could be used for the classroom. So we faced some space challenges. Recruitment, I've already mentioned. One of the other big things that we face is we have turnover just like you. And when the turnover happens, we have to work diligently to get our training for our staff up to speed. And when turnover happens in the school and we have new administrators or new teachers we're engaging with, we need to help them to understand what our model is all about and why we do things, because it does look and feel sometimes differently than the regular classroom. And so we appreciate the partnership and the patience with your new staff, as well as with us when we have new members of our team as well. So where do we go from here? Every year, at the end of the year, we collaborate with partnering and looking at our team and seeing what we've done well, where have we struggled, meeting with your team and reviewing the program, finding out what we need to do differently, how can we tweak things and make it more successful, what needs to change on your end perhaps as well. And so it's just a real transparent time of discussion. So that'll be coming up on all of these models to see what we might need to do looking ahead to the 22-23 school year. Many times it's refining the process and the details of referrals and what steps need to happen, how we can be stronger in transitioning students and moving them out of Boost and the transition classrooms. You know, what can we do differently to make that a smoother, more successful experience for the students? Again, thank you for your time this evening. I'll open up the floor for questions. You can move to the last slide, please. There's the 5 categories I've discussed tonight, very briefly. I know I've thrown a lot at you fast.
I do have a question
Sure.
or at least something for you to maybe comment about. With the Boost classrooms, I remember when we did mention that it didn't quite go as well as what we had thought at the beginning, because I think we didn't actually implement it with integrity. so to speak, or with Fidelity. It was basically to be a slow transition back. Again, I think it wasn't to be all based on behavior, and we kind of made it into that because the behaviors were a little more challenging than what we thought they'd be when we came back. I guess any thoughts about that?
Thank you. When the first challenge we faced was you were applying for grant money, and the grant money had to be approved and put out. And so we found out the end of the first week of August that it was approved, and we needed to hire staff and be ready within several weeks, about 2.5 weeks for the school year. So we rushed that, and normally we would have had more extensive training on our side. But then when we moved in and the referrals started flowing, they were not gradual. We had numbers quickly out of the gate, and some of them had behaviors, which I don't think your district could probably predict all of those. Some students were having challenges, maybe they didn't before COVID. But once they were with us, we had to adapt, and our staffing pattern did not account for behavior students. We didn't hire behavior coaches, which we do in a lot of our other models. So we had educational facilitators and assistants, and we did have a certified teacher and a social worker. So that framework, even those staff coming on knowing this was their role, and now they're dealing with students running out of the hallway or really being aggressive in their actions and statements. So there were challenges for sure with the students that we had.
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
So you shared the data with us as far as the number of referrals and students engaged, that sort of thing. And the last thing you talked about was where do we go from here, refining the process and details for all programs. And that's one, if I could offer a suggestion, because one of the things that I saw, and I've talked, and I appreciate your organization and what they've done for the district. When I've talked to some of the school leaders, they really appreciate the services. And so one of the things that I was interested in is if you could somehow study or get some data points related to, as it relates to kids when they enter, when you first engage them, such as maybe attendance, GPA, suspension data, and maybe some assessment data points as well. And so that when they conclude or when they go through the process, then you can kind of compare those two. And that would be very, I guess, informative to the board and to of course, the district as well, and helping you all tweak what needs to be tweaked to kind of improve things there.
Actually, we do track those things. I just didn't go that deep into the presentation this evening. Paul, would you want to maybe come up and share just a bit about that? It's important for you. But your question is great.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm back there nodding my head. I'm like, yes, you nailed it. But we really, that's part of what we want to refine with our partner districts is, I know that the kids are on your radar and I know you need to move them or put them where they need to be, but we need that clear process so we can get that data, that important stuff for us to have that and be able to then to show you, hey, this kid came, he was coming to school half the time. We put some interventions in, they're coming 75% of the time. They're not sleeping all day anymore. Like here, those are kind of things. Here's the GPA that tie with that. We've eased some of that adversity, some of those behaviors. We've seen the GPA rise. All that kind of stuff's really important for us. So yeah, I mean, that's something that we are continuing to track and work with and really trying to refine. So I appreciate that support. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so we review, speaking specifically in like the transition classroom world, we meet monthly with our school team leaders and just go through each of our students that we see in there. And then we'll go over their academics, their behavior supports, to go very specific into data points. Behavioral wise, we have a dashboard that we present with that outlining their behavior. So they get a comprehensive view of what's happening with that student. So those are things that we can certainly provide if you're interested.
Sure. And one interesting data point that we did look at in the first year of the elementary model was discipline referrals. And prior to our placement, there was, or once we started about halfway through, there was 700 discipline referral reduction in half a year. just in that 3rd through 5th grade category. Now, I appreciate what you're asking, and we will dig deeper. Other questions?
So how does the transition rate compare with other districts that you have similar programs?
So the
What's your goal, like, what's your goal for transition?
Yeah. So we average across all 30 programs about 54%.
Okay.
So you're not real far off. Some of the programs in your school are a little higher than that or close to that. Some have been a little lower, I think really impacted because of COVID. So you're running very consistent. I think 46 was the number where we are at the moment here.
The other data piece I think would be interesting too is reentry, like data. Are the students that once they're transitioning out, are they staying out? You know what I'm saying? Are they coming, you know, are they coming back in? I don't know the answer to that.
I'm not sure here if we've seen any students return since we started. I don't think there's been any that have come back to the program.
It's surprising. I would have expected the students leaving the district number to be higher. Because typically in these programs, that transition, you know, transient rate is a lot higher, I would think.
And I don't think I would be out of line, Paul, you correct me. Of the other 30 programs, I think the numbers are pretty comparable here that leave the district. It is very low in this model. Any other questions? Thank you very much for your time this evening. We appreciate the partnership we
you.
have with you.
Appreciate it. Okay, next is the audit. Mr. Stauffer, tell us what we want to hear.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Stauffer. I'm a member of the firm of Smith Elliott Kearns Company, or SEK, if you will. I have the results to go over the audit with you here this evening. So I think Nick will be loading that presentation, I hope. Just in summary, while that's getting loaded there, I just want to go over the highlights. What I have here is a summarized PowerPoint presentation for you, where it takes over the 100 pages of the audited financial statements, our management letter, and our required communication with those charged with governance, and try to condense it down into about a 10 or 15-minute presentation for you here this evening. So on the 3rd page then are just some high-level summary results. Mrs. Harrell, to your point, I think what you want to hear is here on this summary.
Good.
Very positive results stemming from the audit this year. First and foremost, we were able to issue an unmodified audit opinion, which is the best opinion that we can issue on the financial statements. And I'll go through those details on the next slide. Financially for the year, the general fund had an increase in fund balance where the revenues exceeded the expenditures by about $2.2 million. And the final bullet point there is just that we didn't have any findings related to our audit. So again, I think 3 very positive notes stemming from the audit this year. On the next page, these are the details of our independent auditors report, where again, we as your independent auditors issue our opinion on your financial statements. What exactly does an unmodified audit opinion mean? I know here unmodified, that's something a bad thing. That's actually the best opinion that we can issue. It means there were no modifications to the report. But essentially that means that we feel that in our opinion, the financial statements are materially correct and can be relied upon. It is not an opinion on internal controls, nor is it an opinion or results of a fraud investigation. I know sometimes people hear the word audit, they think that we look at every transaction. Although it may feel like it to Eric and his staff, we do not look at every transaction. We perform sampling to issue our opinion. Again, we were able to do so this year. On the next page, we're just going to dive into some of the numbers now. I know there's a lot of numbers here on this page, but this is the general fund revenues and expenditures for the year. So that's the 2nd column in. It offers a comparison to the previous year for the 1920 fiscal year, and then does offer a variance to the final budget for 2021 as well. So just a couple of fluctuations across the board. Starting at the very top, you'll see local revenues increased in comparison to last year, and we're also a little bit higher than the budgeted amount as well, by about $925,000. That's very consistent with what we saw with a lot of school districts. If you remember when the budget was adopted for 2020, 2021, COVID was just starting and nobody really knew the real impact of that. So a lot of the guidance was to budget conservatively because we didn't know what the real estate taxes or income taxes impact was going to be. It ultimately didn't have much of an impact on most of the school districts. That's why you're seeing that variance there with the final budget, but you're not out of line. Every other school district that we audit had a large variance with the budget there as your local sources. The other fluctuation obviously is within your federal revenues because you have the additional federal funding, the ESSER program, the Education Stabilization Fund, as well as the CRF, your coronavirus relief fund. I can never say that correctly, but the CRF is much easier for me to say. Funding is there within your federal revenues. Moving down to the expenditure category, again, a little bit of an increase, but less than 1% of an increase in the expenditures in comparison to the previous year. And again, it's slightly more than budgeted by about $574,000, mainly due to spending of that federal funding that we talked about earlier that obviously was not anticipated. Moving down to the other financing sources and uses, the third category there, you'll see the large items are your issuance of long-term financing and refinancing of existing long-term debts. You had 2 refinancings during the year. So kind of an in and out there as far as those dollar amounts are concerned. So literally the bottom line, last year was a surplus, or the revenues exceeded the expenditures by about $595,000. This year, that amount was about $2.25 million. So again, a positive increase in fund balance for the general fund. Oh, and again, that budgeted amount was 0 for a flat budget for the year. On the next page are just some of the explanations that I covered. So I'm going to skip over that and actually go ahead to page number 7 and briefly turn your attention to the food service fund. If you compare your food service fund to 2 years ago, it looks very significantly different than what it did. Obviously, and the biggest piece of that is where the revenues are recorded. So previously, those were the meals sold. That basically shifted because of the reimbursement for the free meals down to non-operating revenue. So in total, still fairly comparable, but a significant shift there from operating to non-operating revenues. Did see a decrease in expenses during the year, a reduction in the salaries and benefits of about $60,000, and food and milk purchase decreased about $65,000. So the bottom line for the year for the food service fund, very close to a break even. But I think the most positive note on this slide that it actually isn't on here. That would be if there were any transfers coming from the general fund. Your food service fund is self-sustaining and there are no transfers to subsidize it from the general fund, which is a very positive note. On the next page, I'll just turn your attention now briefly to the medical insurance fund. Starting at the top, the operating revenues are the amounts charged for the premiums to the general fund and to the food service fund. So you can see an increase there of about $250,000. As far as the expenses are concerned, and I apologize, we had a small typo there. The previous year, the amounts that are listed as far as the expenses are correct. The subtotal there is not actually $5.755 million. It's actually $5,065,000. So when you compare the expenses, they are actually very comparable to the previous year. And then the bottom line, again, a positive increase in that position there of $153,000. Last year, you did have the payment to join the Lincoln Benefit Trust. That's what that large $4 million transfer is there for. So most of the rest of my presentation here is just some graphical analysis, just to go over some trends over time. The first graph is under the full accrual basis of accounting. So it combines all your governmental funds, records capital assets and long-term liabilities, and then also offers the net position. So your school district, along with every other school district, again, that we audit, and I would imagine every school district in Pennsylvania is a negative net position. Nothing alarming there. The reason for that are your pension and your OPEB liabilities for your share of the PCERS portion of those plans. Those total about $90 million. Your deficit net position is about $50 million. So that's what's driving that down there is your proportionate share of those liabilities. On the next page, I'll just turn your attention now briefly to the revenues of the general fund. Obviously, the largest source of revenues for the school district are within your taxes. You can see a consistent increase there over the past 5 years. And just a reminder there, as far as those taxes are concerned, those are all taxes. So that includes your real estate taxes, earned income taxes, as well as realty transfer taxes. So it's not just your real estate taxes that are included in that line item. And then the other significant item are your state sources. And again, you can see very comparable to the previous year. And the other fluctuations on the right-hand side are your federal sources, again, the ESSER and the CRF funds for the increase for 2021. On the next page, sticking with the revenues, but this information is 1 year behind just to offer comparison analysis. So on the left-hand side is Waynesboro School District. Top right are school districts within the LIU. Bottom right are school districts of a similar size within the state. So again, once again, the largest source of revenues are taxes, about 47%. The next largest are your state sources, right around 44%. And a little bit of an outlier for you is the red category, and those are your other local. Because you have the Abraxas program, that's what's driving that up to be a little bit higher there. And then you can compare that again to the LIU schools. A little bit more fluctuation there between the taxes and the state sources. But again, overall fairly comparable and very consistent with the previous year as well as far as those graphs are concerned. On the next page, it just turns your attention now to the expenditure side of things, looking at it by function. So you can see most of the categories very consistent once again with the previous year. and a slight increase within the instruction category, and mainly due to an increase for tuition to other LEAs as well as charter schools for 2021. And that's really shown on the next page. It looks at the same expenditures, only instead of by function, it looks at it by object. So you can see again, the salaries, a slight decrease actually in comparison to the previous year. The only significant fluctuation is right in the middle of the page or other purchase services, and once again, a tuition to local LEAs as well as charter schools for 2021. On the next page is a similar pie comparison graphs. Again, Waynesboro on the left-hand side, LIU top right, school districts of similar size bottom right. I'll focus on the largest two categories. The blue and the red are the salaries and benefits. For Waynesboro, that averages out to about 64%. For the LIU schools, also 64%. And for the school districts of a similar size, 65%. So very comparable as far as the salaries and benefits are concerned. One fluctuation I want to point out, terrible with colors, the teal colored on the left-hand side, it says 16% for Waynesboro School District. Again, driven a little bit higher because of the Abraxas expenditures that are associated with that. And then at the top, the maroon and the dark green categories, those are debt service and transfers. For the school district, you're right around 9%, where the average for the LIU schools is 12% and school districts of a similar size, 13%. It's a little bit less in debt service in comparison to other school districts. The next graph just gives you a fund balance and net position comparison over the past 5 years by fund. So on the left-hand side, on the next slide on page number 15, we have the general fund. So once again, you can see the increase in the fund balance for this year, about $2.2 million, right around $6.5 million at the end of the year. On the right-hand side, again, the medical insurance fund, because of switching to the Lincoln Benefit Trust, you see the transfer out of that, and the fund sitting within the Lincoln Benefit Trust. I just wanted to highlight the food service fund because they record under the full accrual basis of accounting as well. They record their share of the PSERS and OPEB liabilities. That's why you're seeing that as a negative, where the general fund doesn't record that because it's under the modified accrual basis of accounting. The last couple of graphs that we have on page number 16 are expenditures per ADM or average daily membership. You can see how Waynesboro averages out in comparison. That averages out to about 13,400. In comparison to LIU schools, 17,200, and all school districts within Pennsylvania, about 18,900. And then the last graph that I have is an unassigned fund balance as a percentage of the expenditures. Again, this is 1 year behind, so a different picture as of June 30, 21. But last year, that unassigned fund balance about 5.35%. On the average for LIU and all school districts within Pennsylvania, right around 7%. But again, different picture here in 21, with obviously the increased fund balance during the year. On the next page, I'll just turn your attention now briefly to the schedule of expenditure of federal awards, or your CFA. Again, this accumulates all the total federal expenditures for the year. That total is about $5.4 million. Compared to the year before, that total was $2.9 million. So I know I've mentioned the increase in the federal funding. To me, that really stuck out there as far as the total federal expenditures were concerned. So as part of our audit, we also perform what's known as a single audit, where we look at certain federal programs. Despite the title single audit, we actually looked at 3 programs this year: the Education Stabilization Fund, the Coronavirus Relief Fund, and the Child Nutrition Cluster are the 3 programs that we tested as part of that single audit. And I'm happy to report on the next page the schedule of expenditure, or excuse me, the schedule of findings and question costs. Happy to report that we didn't have any findings. Once again, both related to the financial statement audit as well as the major federal awards programs audit, where we looked at those federal programs. So I think a very positive note: new programs, new compliance, didn't have any findings to report on related to that. On the next page, just wrapping up briefly with what's known as our management letter. The purpose of this letter is to go over any recommendations that we had. We had some minor recommendations related to some IT items, as well as some suggestions in regards to the reconciliation process. We also have a summary of new standards and details of how they'll impact your financial statements in the future, and we'll assist with those as they become effective. And then all of the graphical analysis that I just covered are in the separate management letter, not within the financial statements themselves. And again, we reviewed that letter in detail with management. The next to last item that we have is just our communications with those charged with governance. Had there been any significant issues or disagreements in completing the audit, we'd have to report on those here in this letter. I'm happy to report there were no such issues or disagreements. So that's why we just consider it our standard communications letter. So on the last page, again, it's just a summary related to the audit. Once again, we were able to issue an unmodified audit opinion, which is the best opinion that we can issue on the financial statements. General fund did have an increase in fund balance for the year of about $2.2 million, where the revenues exceeded the expenditures. and happy to report that we didn't have any findings related to our audit. I know that was a lot of information. I hope somewhat fairly quickly for you, but I certainly wanted to open it up for any questions or comments, either related to the presentation that I have or from the actual audit documents themselves.
Stuff. I know you had mentioned about our food service being pretty well self-supporting, self-sustaining. I guess I have a question for you. With many districts that you serve, is that the norm?
I don't know if I'd quite classify it as the norm. We have a fair number of school districts that outsource their operations, and with those, they seem to be self-sustaining for the most part. We have some others that require a transfer on an annual basis just to keep the food service fund afloat. I don't know the number offhand, but I'd say probably a quarter to a third roughly probably require a transfer from the general fund.
Are we losing the free meals that we've had the last, what, 2 years from the federal government?
Yes, I don't think that's.
Right, our understanding is that's not going to be continued for next
That's
year.
what I thought I had read in news items.
I don't know if anything's for sure with the federal government at any point,
Well, that's
but
true, that's.
I understand your point though.
Anybody else? Thanks very much.
Well, thank you so much for your time tonight. We appreciate doing a service for the district. If you have any questions after tonight, please feel free to either filter those through Eric or contact me directly, and we'd be happy to help. So thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will, say what I've said amongst the board here, that where we were 6 years ago and where we are now is on I would say a mile high. It's a lot more than that. It's come a long way. I don't know how long you've been. You weren't here back in 16, were you? Oh, okay. So you were here. So yeah, we've come a long way. So I appreciate Eric, you and Donna and Chelsea and your
Oh,
whole team
business
there.
office,
What
thank
you're
you. They
doing.
do a
So
great job. They really
yeah,
do.
I mean, you guys have done a great job. I
And
appreciate that.
one of his strategic objectives over the last few years to have no finding. You're at that.
Well, and again, we learn a lot. As they go through there, they always give us recommendations. They do a lot of trainings throughout the year. So the more we can do that and implement those programs, it helps us all. So
Well, it's also an emphasis on Dr. Klein, that when he came on board, really intended to bolster certainly the general fund, which has happened too. So I guess we were kind of all on the same page to make that happen, but it still did happen. And so we appreciate that. So thank you very much.
thanks again.
And our food service team,
Yeah.
Mrs. Hellman and all the people that work with that. Fantastic job. I don't know how she made that work a lot through COVID, finding things and all that, but she did. And that's part of this too. So we're grateful for that. Okay. Where are we? Now we're ready for the business items. Okay, student waivers, Dr. Sternerheim.
Thank you, Mrs. Harold. Recommendation is to approve the student waivers as discussed in executive session.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Personnel, Dr. Sternerheim.
Thank you, Mrs. Harold. I'd like to direct your attention to the personnel items in the board docs. We have appointments of support staff. We have a series of leaves. In addition, we have resignation of professional staff, retirements of support staff, termination of support staff, resignation of additional resignations of support staff, transfers of professional staff, as well as additional transfers of professional staff, as well as additional transfers of support staff, appointments of support staff, appointments of coaching staff, and appointments of extended school year teachers, as well as summer school teachers for both the high school and the middle school. Additional changes to elementary math and literacy camp as far as teachers, as well as paraeducators, appointments of game personnel, and additional appointments of support staff. Also, I am delighted to recommend Mr. Marty Bigler as our assistant principal, the Waynesboro Area Senior High School. It has been a lengthy search. Mr. Bigler will be joining us at the April 26th meeting when Dr. McCallum will be presenting on the high school scheduling options. So that is, I believe, all the personnel. Recommendation is to approve as listed.
Wait a bit. Motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Questions for Dr. Sternerheim? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Job descriptions, would that be you too? Or is that?
Yes,
Dr.
I
Klein, okay.
believe so. So I do want to recognize Miss Claire Martin, who was our producer for the all-school production. She had worked on these in terms of the actual job descriptions that were probably more fitting in terms of what the roles of the Performing Arts Center stage facility manager, as well as the director, as well as the producer does during the course of the all-school production. So the recommendation is to approve these job descriptions as listed.
Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Questions about any of these positions?
Just to clarify, they're already in existence. We're
Right.
Just rewriting the job description.
Okay, right. Okay,
And they're already filled.
that's good.
At least for now.
Year's all-school production or?
At this point, I don't believe do we have we had one resignation or not? Unfortunately, we had a resignation, so we will be reposting. Yes, his dream, his
Oh.
career. So. Okay.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Bus drivers, Mr. Holtzman.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. We have several district drivers, some people close to us here in the room, as well as drivers for Heckmeyer's and McLeaves. So we're asking for your approval. They passed all of the requisite background information.
Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on to the reapproval of the 21-22 calendar, Dr. Sternheim.
Okay, as noted in the board docs, administration recommends a reapproval of the 2022 school calendar with the additional Act 80 day for October 8th for seniors. And this was originally coded as a parent-teacher conference. So this will allow our seniors to have enough days as well as hours in order to graduate as designated.
Motion,
Move to approve.
Second.
questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Health and safety plan, Dr. Klein.
All right, this, recently, the Department of Health and the Pennsylvania Department of Education had given us a clear go-ahead not to be sending, that we did not have to submit any positive cases or any close contacts, nothing to the state as far as COVID. So with that being the case in our health and safety plan, I reflected that with actually on page 2 of 5, letter B, which I appreciate. James had pointed out to me that it was in that we had missed that part. And what we have is that I eliminated on 2B that masks are required on buses because they are no longer required on buses according to the federal. I think just airplanes now. So that has been removed. And also on page 3 of 5, I underline a different wording, which basically says WASD will not continue to contact, trace, and notify close contacts of a positive case since PDE and DOH are not requiring the reporting. I left it, I put that in there just so it was clear and underlined it so you could see it. They're the only 2 changes I believe we made. Is that correct?
Okay. Well, all right, that's okay. That's okay. Go ahead.
Have we removed restrictions for classrooms for physical arrangements, like are students permitted to work in partners or permitted to work in small groups?
We have been working small.
Okay, so we're still gonna, I was in a classroom, we're still gonna maintain the plastic shields in the small groups?
They're still available, whether or not our teachers are electing to use them to the full capacity at this point. It might be more of an individual choice.
So is that something you plan on continuing forever without that choice?
I don't think. I think it was put in place this year. We had allowed it to be in place there, we certainly. But it, we
Well,
gave
I
them
don't know
that
how, I
option
don't know
this
how I
year.
feel about it, but I think I just question you go in some classes and the small group reading tables are all divided by plastic shields and you go in another room and they're not. So I don't know how I feel about it.
I will continue to observe that, Dr. Royer. I know I was at Fairview all day on Friday. I don't recall seeing that, but again, it could be. I do believe we have faculty and staff with some immune deficiency issues, and so therefore they're being a little more cautious. But yeah, we can definitely continue to assess that. And who knows what will happen? You never know.
Right. Any other questions? Do we have a motion?
To approve.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
And just as a reminder, we have to, every 6 months, have to renew this, bring it back to the board just for reapproval. For Esser's money. So this actually, we can go in our 6 months, which is kind of nice for making this change. So.
Good. Okay, the next item, which is elementary school of choice for faculties, students, is, doesn't have a recommendation from the administration with this. This is more of a board initiative. So basically, we're looking at whether or not we want to go back to what we used to do, which would allow faculty and administration to have their children go to the elementary school of their choice if there is room. So was tabled from 2 weeks ago. Just we need to clarify exactly what we're looking at. So I think we've gotten that clarification down. We have a motion specific to what we're talking about here. That would be helpful.
Me to read that.
That'd be great.
I make a motion that Waynesboro area school district faculty and administrators will be permitted to enroll their children in elementary schools outside their attendance area if they wish, being able to choose the elementary school for their child to attend. This can happen if and only if the school request meets our policy for open enrollment and policy 206, falling under the numbers for enrollment threshold. Teachers would need to provide transportation. The final notification will be communicated by July 25.
And these teachers, of course, would have to be residents within the Waynesboro area school district.
Would you like me to email that to you?
Yeah, that'd be good. Okay, let's have a motion here first of all then. I don't know that you said it's a motion. Did you say it's a motion? Okay, I'm sorry. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any discussion or questions or anything about this, what this would entail? Okay, if not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Next item is principles for governance and leadership. Dr. Klein.
All right, just a few weeks ago, the board participated in a workshop with Pennsylvania School Board Associations. At that point, we had talked about the principles for governance and leadership, and the board had expressed interest in revitalizing that. I think we have had it approved in the past and wanted to bring that back to the board for this particular board to approve and to sign off on. And as attached there, you can see the different principles. As advocate earnestly, lead responsibly, govern effectively, plan thoughtfully, evaluate continuously, and communicate clearly.
And act ethically.
Oh,
Carol,
I'm sorry.
find that.
We like that one.
Yes.
So we,
I do like that.
assuming this is approved, we will all be signing that and have it displayed over there on the bulletin board. So. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. Do we have a motion to approve our acceptance of these principles?
Move to approve.
Second.
Any comments, questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, good. All right, on to the organizational chart, Dr. Klein.
All right, before you is a revamped organizational chart. As you know, usually every fall, September, August, I ask for the board to reapprove the organizational chart. Typically, we have some changes throughout the year. And I think it's just good practice to reapprove it annual. However, we have to approve it again here because there has been a change. As you know, in the past, we had a K-5 director of special ed and student services, and then a grade 7 to 12 director of special education student services. We have divided those into two people instead of having the grade levels divided. So this organizational chart reflects that.
All right, do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second,
Okay, thank you. Questions on this?
did we just recently hire a school resource officer that's going to report to the school police officer?
Yes,
Should
actually,
that-
we could include that if you
Should that be
wanted.
included if he's going to report to?
Sure, that
Officer
could be
Gordon?
included.
We have not hired that individual.
Right.
Oh, we
yet,
have
but
not
that's
hired
pending.
that
That
But
may
the
be-
position's been approved.
Position,
Yeah, the
position
position
and
is
job
there.
description
Okay.
has been
Yep.
approved. That position would be hopefully added on the April 26th.
So I thought I read in the job description that he was going to report to Officer Gordon.
That's why
correct?
we should do this once a year. If you caught that, that's
Okay.
good. And if you want, you can amend the, motion and add that, and we could have that added.
You want me to do that?
Sure.
That
Well-
we-
I mean, that's up to US. board.
Well, I was gonna say, why don't we, how about you, Mr. Marvin? You want to
Oh.
Yeah, I
amend it to
can
include that?
move to approve as amended with was it the school resource officer reporting to the school police
Police
officer?
And the second, I mean,
Second
Ms.
is-
Miles?
yeah.
Okay, okay, great. Any other questions, comments, catches? Okay, if not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, the audit, Mr. Holtzman.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Obviously, Kevin from Smith Elliott Kearns did the presentation here earlier. So what we're doing is asking for your approval of the 2021 Wayne School District financial statements.
Motion,
Move to approve the audit.
Second.
any last questions there for Mr. Holtzman? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Right. Okay,
I'm sorry, I missed.
missed the
Second was.
second, okay. Okay. On to retention incentives and salary schedules for 22-23, and that's that you, Dr. Klein? Okay.
Yeah, administration recommends the approval of the salary adjustments and retention incentives as presented.
Do we have a motion before any discussion?
Move to approve.
Second, somebody?
Second.
Okay. Comments, questions on this?
I think just a comment. Being in the business world, hiring is hard. And so I think it is better to retain than try to go find someone new. As we just saw, trying to find a new assistant high school principal has been a journey.
Mhm.
And so I think this is also good to, for those on this pay schedule, to show that we're very thankful for their service as well to the school district. So I'm very much for the retention incentives and increasing the schedule.
Anybody else? I've said it before, it's been a goal of mine and a couple other board members as well. I'm glad for supervisors and admin, but especially the support staff, which forever has been at the bottom, no matter where I went. We were just so low, and they work, I have great appreciation for support staff that I work with over the years. They're kind of the heart and the soul of the school in a lot of ways. So I'm happy that we're looking at this as well. Anybody else? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Next item, sidewalk repair, Mr. Holtzman.
Thank you. The borough is doing some work on Virginia Avenue, and unfortunately, when they do work on streets, that requires us, to take a look at sidewalks and curbs. They notified us that we had some areas that needed improvement. as part of that project. And they, of course, have a kind of tight time frame that has to be done by, I think it's July 1, if I remember correctly, for this project. We actually approved part of this work at a previous board meeting, and that was to lift. There was a large section, maybe 80 feet or so, of concrete that had actually sunk down against the curbing. So we're using a separate company to actually lift that up, to kind of drill in through it and then push a compressed material underneath of it, lift it up. So hopefully that goes well. But this work here, we did go out and we bid it out. We have the lowest responsible bidder here that can meet those qualifications, and it's the local company here, GRC.
Okay.
And it would come from capital fund, by the capital reserve.
And that was one thing I had to learn when I moved to Pennsylvania, because Maryland, the municipalities take care of the sidewalks and the curbs, to my knowledge, unless some Marylander can tell me differently. So, and it doesn't get any cheaper.
So this is a sidewalk along our practice fields.
Correct.
Mhm.
Along the
So
athletic
people across the
fields.
street that have houses, are they gonna have to put new sidewalks into?
In certain areas, yeah. In fact, some of them
should.
have already started on
Yeah.
that work. Yeah, some of them were a little ahead of us. They don't have to go out to bid. So, but
Okay.
yeah, you're correct. They actually
Yeah.
have to do the same thing. And again, they are very kind in the sense that we don't have to replace everything. We just have to
Okay.
bring it up to the correct level of safety purposes and up to the proper specs. So, which is good news, because replacing an entire section like that would be very expensive.
Okay, do we have a motion? Not
Move
yet.
to approve.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right,
Thank you.
CSIU agreement. That you, Mr. Holtzman, again?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So CSIU is our financial and HR software company. This is who we use. It's Central Susquehanna Intermediate Unit. Actually, it's an intermediate unit that offers this software. I can't tell you how many districts exactly use it, but I think when we've spoken to them, it's roughly about half the school districts in PA use this software. So this is what we use for our primary handling of everything from bills to payroll purposes. We are dropping some modules this year. We're dropping the census data, the tax billing, and the tax collection. Part of that's because you drop the occupation tax. So we no longer have to do the census. We don't have to do the occupation tax billing through them. And our normal billing will go now from the county. All the other districts in the area actually use Chambersburg to print their bills. So we'll be using Chambersburg to print the actual bills and have J&M actually mail those bills out. So we're asking for your approval of the other modules, fund accounting, payroll, and personnel this year.
Motion,
Move to approve.
Second.
questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you. Pure Star Human Services, Mr. Holtzman. Or I guess, who is this? Is that you? Or is that Dr. Klein?
Or it could be.
Okay. Ms. McDonald.
You do need to come up to the podium.
Pure Star is an organization that works with high schoolers and then transitioning out after high school. It's for students that have addiction issues, and it's a free service, a community service. So it's just an agreement saying that if we need that service, that we agree to use it. Great opportunity for the students. Fortunately, good thing we haven't used it yet. Hope we never have to, but
Yeah.
Great opportunity.
Good. Motion to approve?
Second.
Any questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? You? Okay, the budget, Mr. Holtzman,
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
preliminary budget.
Preliminary budget, yes. So we do have a presentation here that's available for you on your laptops as well as for the public here as well. So this is the preliminary budget. Just as a reminder, this is not the final budget. We have mandated a 30-day grace period, so to speak, or a cooling off period, or whatever you want to call it. It's really designed more so to allow the public to have more input. So that's really the concept behind the 30 days. During that time, we actually have to go out, and we actually have to advertise the budget. We'll advertise that locally here. We'll put it on the website. We'll have it available here in the office as well. So if anybody wants to come in and take a look at the budget and have some questions, we can go ahead and do that as well. So that's why we ask to go ahead and do the preliminary budget a little early. Obviously, by state law, you don't have to have it done by June 30th, but it's very hard to approve the budget on June 30th and send tax bills out on July 1. It just can't happen. So districts that have done that, it can still happen that way. However, you have to delay then your tax bills. So you might go out about 10 days which kind of delays your tax collection. It does kind of throw a little wrinkle into a lot of things, but nonetheless. So we'll cover those items. Again, because of the 30 days, May 24th is the earliest that you would be able to go ahead and do the budget, the actual final budget. So this preliminary budget on the next slide is $73.1 million. There's a deficit of $853,000. Right now, we are not putting a tax increase in the budget, but that is something that could be presented at the final budget. But at this point, it is a flat tax rate for the next year. We're continuing with all of our educational programs and even expanding some programs, especially at the high school. It would take about 3.4 mils at this point to balance the budget. We don't have final numbers everywhere yet, but as we get those through, we'll go ahead and put that information in here. I know everyone always wants to know how much does that cost? So for the average owner occupied home, this is a homestead farmstead, about half the tax parcels in our district. It's about $62 more. It's about $1,825. So for the year is what it would cost them for their school tax. Sometimes, we often bring this up that earned income taxes that come off paychecks often seem to be a little bit more hidden, so to speak, in some ways. If you think about the average family in our community has about $50,000 of income. If they're paying a 4% state and local income tax, which we have a flat tax in our state, they're actually paying $2,000 in earned income taxes to the state and such. So this bill is actually a little bit smaller, even though it doesn't feel that way. It's because it's one bill, so to speak, versus spread out over 52 weeks of the year.
We want to make sure it's clear that $62 is for the year, the average tax.
That's correct. It's for the average taxpayer. Certainly some will be more. I apologize. Yeah, some will be more, some would be less. Certainly. Yeah. I'm sorry. If you had a question, please feel free. I'm sorry. Okay. So revenue wise, we always do project additional real estate revenue. We do not assume it's going to be flat all year. We manage that and look at that with the county. So as more properties are assessed or built or constructed, we're going to pick up that revenue as well. And that is reflected in here. On average for us, it's about $250,000 a year, give or take, that we add to that budget for revenues every year. We're also expecting some growth in earned income taxes and transfer taxes. Real estate transfer taxes, that again, that's one of those concerning ones. It's great news that it really came up a lot. I mean, properties have sold tremendously, but I don't know if that will continue, especially as the Fed fund rates continue to go up. So we're still projecting an increase, but maybe not as much as we have in the past year at least. We are expecting additional state revenue. We get basic ed and special ed funding. We get other revenue streams that don't really add up as much or change as much year over year, but we're expecting about $800,000 between those. That's the amount that we actually received this year as well. Now, that's a lot compared to some previous years. Some previous years, we were really happy if we got an extra $200,000 or $300,000, but we're projecting an extra $800,000 just as we received this year going into next year. The governor did release a budget, which was significantly higher than we have seen in, I don't know, I've been here, here 7 years, I guess now, and I've never seen one that high. If we were to get the governor's budget, it would be actually $2.6 million of additional revenue next year. I don't anticipate that happening myself. I don't think anybody else is either. But again, we're significantly below that $2.6 million at this point for a projection. And as in most years, more than likely, you will pass a budget before the state passes a budget. While the state is supposed to pass it by June 30th, historically, they don't always pass it by June 30th. So districts are required to typically pass that budget in the hopes of the state passing theirs in a favorable manner. We are using some of our ESSER 2 funding as one-time revenue to help balance. Programs, some of our expenses, we're seeing inflation like everybody else is seeing inflation, unfortunately. Some of our costs are tied to inflation. The transportation index is tied to that. So we pay our contractors based on the index. That's going up 7% for next year. We're going to have to pay our contractors 7% more in the busing world. Our medical costs are actually going up by 7% next year as well. PSERS continues to go up. We're just over 35% in next year's budget. So for every $100 in salary, we have to pay $35 to pension. So you can imagine that line item continues to go up. We're still anticipating about $3.6 million for cyber charters. That's roughly the equivalent of, what would we say, I guess, well, about 14 mils of property taxes effectively take care of that $3.6 million. So you can imagine that if those students were back in the district, our costs really wouldn't go that much. If you take that total student body and spread it out over the K-12 world, we really wouldn't have to hire or do too much different, really from a busing perspective, classroom perspective. But yet that would save 3.6 million. We are adding a third psychologist. That's been an issue for several years that we have, tried to successfully hire one and bring another person on board. Looking at emotional support classrooms next year and additional teachers at the high school. Then, of course, it continues all of our technology programs.
Can I just reemphasize
Please.
that? There seems to be, somebody just brought this up the other day. Cyber schools are not free. Okay, like people in the public, like it's like, oh, you should send your kid because it's free. It's not free. I mean, we're paying a lot of money for cyber schools. So, whether you choose that or not, it isn't free. And as you can see here, it's gone up. I mean, it was only 1 million, not that, I think when I came on, it was only 1
It was in the
million.
1 million range. I can tell
Yeah.
you, just before the pandemic, it was 2. And yet
Yeah.
we did offer virtual
It's just
programs
killing
and
us.
we offered
Yeah.
in-person instruction as well,
It's-
all throughout the year.
It's very impactful.
It
and
is.
People don't realize that. Okay, sorry to
No,
interrupt
no,
you there.
I appreciate that. In fact, I think we heard at the budget committee last night, and I don't want to get the number wrong, so please don't hold me accountable, but I think the state data showed that for every dollar in real estate taxes that have been raised over the last couple of years, 44 cents of that typically goes directly to cyber charters. So, when you start thinking about that across the whole state, that's a lot of money that's going to the cyber charters.
So it's not free.
It is not free.
Okay.
On the next slide, what we always often try to do is, and again, I use current expenditures when I do a comparison. When Kevin from Smith Elliott, he takes everything in play. I take out the financing piece, and the weird part is because the way the state reports and compares all the data, the financing, if you refinance a bond, it shows as additional revenue that year. When it really wasn't revenue, we just refinanced a bond. It would almost be like someone saying, I refinanced my house and I made an extra $100,000 last year. We didn't make 100,000, we just refinanced your house. So anyway, this is the current expenditure data again from 1920, and you can see where we are compared to the average school district. I think when we run the numbers, we would need about an extra 19 or $20 million in our budget if we spent what the average Pennsylvania school district spends on education. And that's per year. So you think about that over 5 years, we're talking $100 million more it would cost if we spent the same amount as a regular public school does in VA. Our fund balance, we often look at it, places will look at it as a percentage of your budget and things of that nature, but we kind of take a little different spin on it. We take a look at it per student, average daily membership. And you can see we're just under 1,000 now. We've come up a little bit since then. Obviously, this data is a little old. We had a good, we had an increase to it, but you can see the average district has 4,000. The highest has $25,000 per student, if you can imagine. Again, that's probably a legacy issue from Hold Harmless over
What
many
page are
decades.
you referring to?
Oh, I
right now?
apologize. Yep, 5
Five?
of 7. I'm sorry. And again, I always bring this up. We are one of the most frugal school districts in Pennsylvania. We're typically in the bottom 1%, historically have been for many, many years. On the next slide there, I'm talking a little bit about ESSER funds. Again, I just really want to emphasize it's a one-time money. We're going to be using this for some capital projects if they're ultimately approved in that direction, as well as other items. One of our concerns is, as we've added some programs and such, and if we're using ESSER funds, is that when those funds run out, we need to make sure we have a financial mechanism that can take those programs over and continue them if that's what we feel is the right thing to do for the district and the students. So I just bring that up as well. Most districts are having that same situation. I think there's been a lot of talk of it would have been nice if they could have spread this out even longer, but it wouldn't have defined the concept of stimulus money. But it would have probably given districts a lot more opportunities to probably use the funds in a manner that would spread it out. Because if it's one-time money, you use it really quick, and then you really have a problem sometimes, ultimately with those one-time funds.
And sometimes you make too quick of this decision.
Yeah.
And they're spending money on something that maybe down the road they regret.
Right. And they're talking about, that you can use some of these funds over 5 years, and that's great, but they still haven't approved the ESSER 3 grants yet. I mean, we submitted our grant well before the timeline. They still haven't approved all those grants. And yet, technically, you can't use the funds after about 25, 26 months from now. So that's how far this is into it already. You can go backwards, but it still makes it a bit of a challenge. So in summary, the budget can be balanced if we do a tax increase or we find other revenue opportunities, but we're not recommending at this stage any reduction to programs. We're increasing some educational opportunities for our students. If we did a tax increase at the 3.4 mils, we're actually 28% lower than the Act 1 index. That's the inflationary index. I can tell you that a lot of districts, a lot of business offices they would recommend that you go to the index every time. And the reason is because you don't have another bite at the apple, so to speak. School districts used to have unlimited taxing authority, meaning you could choose not to raise taxes for 3 years and then raise them 10 mils and make up the difference. But we don't have that opportunity anymore. You have to stay within the index every year. So if you, so to speak, get behind that inflationary index, because we're feeling that inflation certainly across the board, it makes it harder. So again, theoretically, it's sometimes business offices would say, hey, I'd really recommend the full amount because it could go down in the future years. But right now we're looking at a lower recommendation at the state.
Okay. You have some questions, comments about our preliminary budget? That again, can be changed.
And we're not acting on this tonight.
We're going to vote for whether we accept the preliminary
Preliminary,
budget,
okay.
but things like taxes,
Okay.
that we are not doing
Okay.
tonight, how to resolve that.
Okay.
If we approve it and it stays and doesn't change, we will have to find $800,000 somewhere. Yeah.
All of these documents will be on the website.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yep.
I'm not sure where you're putting them, but just, if we could just make sure that they're easy to find.
Sure. We can do it. We can put them in, yeah, we can put them in more than one place. We typically put them under business office and then also in the front, but we can put them, make sure that they're out
Yeah, I
there.
think it should probably be like when you open the website,
I agree.
like maybe
If it's
above
hard
the
to
COVID
find, they're-
protocols.
Okay.
Mhm. Okay, we have any comments? What we're thinking here? You make any comments about this budget proposal? Well, I know I didn't have a motion yet, but, okay, all right, let's have a motion, then we'll discuss. Thank you.
Move to approve.
Okay,
Second,
okay, now how about anybody want to make any comments or questions? Ready? Okay, some of this, as Mr. Holtzman said, is needed, that we have to, we always have those PSER contributions we have to do. We have to pay the cyber school costs. We have special ed regulations we have to do. Some of it, I think the proposal includes recommendations for meeting Dr. Klein's first choice initiative. Some positions that have been lost in the past, we feel are important, and suggesting that we replace some of those, all those things, as well as facilities things we still have to do. So, that's what's included in here for anybody that wants it in a nutshell. That's another little nutshell to put it in. So if there's no other comments or debates or questions, and of course, we'll go back to this again in a month when we have the final vote. If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, business items, Mr. Holtzman.
Thank you. Typically we go down each, 1 through 3 or whatever we have in that area. If you want me to do it differently, please just let me know. But we have the board bills payable. That's for the cafeteria and the general fund as well. Because again, as mentioned earlier, those two different funds are split between cafeteria and the general fund. We also have requisitions listed there for you as well. There's a lot of items in there that are with ESSER funds, and there's a lot of technology items. It's because of a long lead time. There's truly a concern anymore now of getting some of this technology in time to implement for the next fiscal year. So that becomes part of the issue. Then under exonerations, these are exonerations of occupation and per capita bills that we receive from our third-party collector because individuals have met those requirements. And last is an upset sale or a tax sale that did occur, and then we receive a portion of that to pay.
So is that what an
resale
upset
taxes.
sale is?
Yeah,
Tax?
sometimes it's actually sold for less than what the actual value was of taxes and things of that nature that are sold. The mechanism for that, it takes a long time. It can take 3 years typically in Pennsylvania before property ever goes up there. If you'll notice, we don't have too many that come here. I mean, typically we'll have trailers. We have a lot of issues with some trailers where those are found or not found, and taxes are owed on it.
Mhm.
Yeah, it could have been, yeah. Double check. But yeah. So, and again, this is effectively approving what the court has already approved.
Motion,
motion to approve.
Second.
questions? Okay, we're doing all three here. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
All right, Clayton Cabinet comments.
Well,
Anyone?
Actually, I like to introduce Dr. Allison Popko. Congratulations, Ally, and we're proud of you. That's all I got.
Anything else? Anyone, Clayton? Okay, how about board comments? Comments from the board?
Yeah, last Tuesday, I was sworn in on the LIU Board of Directors.
Oh,
Dr. West and the good people there in New Oxford. Is New Oxford? Yeah,
Yeah.
very nice people. And on April 25th, I'm going to be headed to Harrisburg for Advocacy Day. And so I'm going to be meeting with some of the legislators. I don't know who exactly now. They'll give me the schedule on the 19th. But just looking forward to advocating for, and we've been talking about some of the good things that we're doing and kind of giving them like a little more anecdotal type of picture, if you will, of the district. You know, what could we do with the money that's been shorted us for these number of years? Especially, and even with our first choice, you know, and building that program up as well. So that's what we'll be advocating for. on the
Great.
25th.
You'll say all
Good
that
for you.
tactfully, right?
Right. That's right.
So I did have one more.
sure.
Before the Folium people left, and just to, I knew I was looking for another data piece that they did not share, but within the Boost program, one of their highlights that they did have with the Boost program is that their attendance has gone up with those students 22% this year,
Wow.
which meant the kids started at 55% and are at 77% now. So that has increased. And if you look at the research that's out there on this past year, it is pandemic as far as attendance throughout this nation. As far around the nation, schools are really struggling with attendance of students. So I wanted to share that was a data I was hoping he was going to share it. Didn't. So I went out and double checked that it was real and brought it back. So anyhow, that's the last.
Okay. Any other board member comments?
Just want to say thank you to the business office for putting together the budget. Having sat in on the budget committee meeting and having to deal with budgets, I know how much work goes into it. And so just thank you to Eric and his team and the other team members that go into putting even a preliminary budget. And then again, thank you to Mr. Stauffer and SEK. If you're not in the banking or accounting world, this is the most wonderful time of the year, and that it's right before tax day. So the fact that he was willing to come and present to us and put together a good presentation and we had a good audit. I'm very thankful that he took the time and was a very busy season for CPAs right now. So,
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Okay, if not, we'll be going to executive session for a couple personnel items. We won't be coming back. We have a motion to adjourn.
move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.